We'd like to call the April 17, 2012 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time we'd like to introduce the board members, starting on my right.
Jim Hilly.
Gary Willis.
Christopher Bluer.
Todd Chernick.
Rita Young.
The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-legal board composed of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with hearing requests for variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determinations. With regard to decisions on primary variances, the board's basis for decision is provided by these four considerations. A, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance, and B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant, and C, relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties, and D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and the substantial justice is due. And our sign variance consideration is relief only to the sign ordinance may be granted where existing foliage or structures bring about a hardship, or by a sign meeting minimum letter size, square footage, and height requirements cannot be read from an adjoining public road. This time we need to approve the February 2012 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Motion to approve.
We have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor of passing February 2012 meeting minutes, raise your right hand. Passed. Now we need to approve.
You call opposed.
Pardon me?
Just for the record, you call opposed.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now we need to approve the March meeting minutes. I need a motion.
I move to approve the March minutes.
Anyone with the second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Let it know that it passed as well. Our first case is V11-011 to allow an accessory structure to be located in the front yard. This was deferred from the last meeting. Staff or council, please present. Or
Mr. Chair, the staff is going to request that this variance be deferred into the next meeting. My last correspondence with the applicant was March 26th, and he stated that he had a survey done that the state requested, and he had forwarded that information on to the state. I haven't heard back from anybody since then, but our engineer is going to speak with the contact person from the state tomorrow and see. That's all I know right now.
council?
Yeah. This is something that I took a look at with Angela this last week in light of the fact that it has persisted on the agenda on a repeat basis for multiple months, maybe 6 or 7 months now. And we kind of looked at the situation we have, what the options this body might have if it wanted to proceed, despite the fact that there's no activity that would push it forward from this board's perspective. Reading the board's bylaws, Section 6 says that if the applicant or its agent is not available at the time of consideration at the meeting, the board shall vote to defer the application to the next available board meeting, which means if they don't show up, you are actually bound to continue it to the next meeting. That's something I'm suggesting you may want to consider, whether those are the steps you want to limit yourself to, that you may want to consider whether you want to consider amending your bylaws to allow you possibly to go ahead and vote, or provide one last notice, or any. There's any number of options you may have, but it's something that kind of ties your hands a little bit. That being said, the fact remains that they do not have a variance. My understanding in this particular situation is that the reason a variance has been requested is because there is an actual violation based on the current circumstances, and that, in theory, the city could proceed with violation, the city's violation steps through code enforcement, and this body could ask staff or someone to look into that, and maybe they might have an opinion as to what steps the city might take, or a recommendation in light of what your experiences have been. I'm not suggesting that may be the case in the situation. It sounds like something it may be moving forward at this point in time. But in light of how long this is taking, I thought it did bring to light this situation that you all face with, and I wanted to raise that to you as an option or something to think about if you ever wanted to in the future take some other action other than to continue it to the next meeting.
So,
Two things. One is I recall this topic being discussed when we formed as a board, and our intent at that time was feeling that if an applicant put this forward, then the board should hear the case. What I think I'm hearing from you is by making a variance request and then the applicant not showing, it could go out into perpetuity, and therefore no action could be taken from the city. In this case, it sounds like the structure is already in violation.
Right, and the extreme case that I could envision is a situation where someone files a request for a variance, the city's code may change, and they may continue to just not show up, and this board cannot make a decision on its application, but it remains outstanding, and under the Georgia's laws currently, there is certainly an argument to be made that they have vested their right to pre-change code, and they can continue to maintain that right without reaching any sort of resolution in this body until such time as they finally decide that they're ready to go forward with it.
Understood.
and this is partially my length of time in this chair. What would it take for us to modify or change our bylaws? What's the process for that?
You could either direct staff to present something or just consider them. We would bring it to another meeting.
Right.
You could have any number of meetings. I would certainly recommend it come before a public hearing.
Sure.
I don't know that that's necessary.
So
But-
either we would bring something forward for this body to entertain in public, or we could recommend staff to bring something forward.
to do
We
that.
could then vote on it and then become part of it.
But my question was more, did it have to go in front of council to change that? Okay.
And perhaps that's something you may want to think about to bring as an agenda item for next month. And if you individually have ideas and want to send them to Angela or myself, yes or no, or if you want us to be prepared to discuss it, we can do that. But it was something that was identified by virtue of doing this. And there may be, I can also go through and provide additional recommendations. I think if we want to do a thorough consideration of other items that might be of interest to the board.
That was going to be my question. Are there any other items that we should address at that time as well? Okay.
So at this time, I think there's, you can ask Angela what her recommendation was with respect to this. I think you recommended deferral, or it was requested? And formally, unless they're present, I think that is your only option. You can push it to the end of the agenda, and if they're not present, then the board is obligated to postpone to the next meeting.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to defer? I can't make it, so somebody needs to.
I'll make a motion to defer V11-011 to the May 2012 meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor of deferring this till May 2012, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. That passed unanimously. Is Stone Creek Church here tonight, Angela?
No.
We're going to do, okay. Our next case is V12001. Staff, please present
Oh.
or update.
Staff would like to request that this case be deferred into the May meeting also. The last I heard from the sign contractor was handling this case, and so he's trying to get in contact, well, he has been in contact with the church, and they're trying to get it together and get this plat submitted to us. They have to do a combination plat, basically, so they're working on it.
Okay. Any questions to staff? We need a motion, please. Yes, sir.
I make a motion to defer case V12-001.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have a motion and a second to defer V12-001 to the May 2012 meeting. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. It passed unanimously. Next case is V12-002, which is deferred from our last meeting to allow units to be both for sale and lease. Angela, will you please present?
I'll give you a summary of this case.
Thank you.
The site is located at 3499 and 3501 Bethany Bend. It's 4.92 acres on TR. They propose to build a four-building project for a total of 98 units. This will be a senior living development. Per the use permit criteria, 80% of the units have to be occupied by a person who's 55 or older. And per the use permit, all of the units are supposed to be owner-occupied. So the applicant is here today to ask for the option of leasing out the units until such time financing can be arranged for them to be sold. None of the other departments had issues with the variance, and staff had no additional conditions for the variance. The applicant is here tonight.
Okay. Any questions from the board to staff?
You all got the email that I forwarded FHA?
Yes.
Yes.
And I guess, do we have a source for that?
You might want to ask the applicant, because I just kind of skimmed it.
Okay.
This time, we'd like to invite the applicant forward to present. And if you would, please state your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Don Rollator. My address 11660 Alpharetta Highway, Suite 630, Roswell, Georgia. I'm here tonight on behalf of BZA American, as is Corey Jones, who is the principal in the corporation. Corey has some information on FHA financing we'd ask the staff to distribute to you. During our short presentation, it may be of some benefit to you if we could do that. This property was zoned in 2009 for multifamily uses. It's zoned TR, and it's on Bethany Bend. It's 3499 and 3501. It's about 4.92 acres. Mr. Jones came back subsequently, and the city approved adding a third story to these senior housing units. This is a senior restricted facility. Nearby properties are zoned for apartments, townhomes, and fairly high-density single-family residential. Our variance request to you is to permit developed units to be offered both for sale and for rent. The purpose is to allow the developer to finance the project and commence construction. The hardship I'd like to direct your attention to first is a marketability hardship. Condominium units of any shape, form, or fashion right now are nearly, I use the word nearly, impossible to finance in a traditional sense through a bank. There is a definite market for senior housing. There are people with that need. And if this variance is permitted, what Mr. Jones would propose to do is to open a sales and reservation office on the property almost immediately and to begin to take interest both in reservations for rental and in for sale. He's asking that 50% of the units be allowed to be rented and that 50% be for sale only. When he gets enough commitments, then his investors will finance the project and he can build the first building. It looks like there'll be 4 buildings. To build the first building, you would build it and all of the amenities. That's where I want to get into the FHA thing for a minute. FHA will not approve a project in concept. It has to be on the ground. So you construct the first phase of your project, you construct the amenities, and you make application to FHA for approval. FHA will come out and review it, and if they find it satisfactory for the use intended, they will then approve it. What that does is make sales take off. FHA financing, available to seniors, thank goodness, requires 3.5% down payment. The balance of the purchase price can be financed with an FHA loan. When that occurs, then this development really picks up speed. The second hardship I'd like to discuss with you is the fact that this is senior housing. Senior housing, I would hope to differentiate to you from regular multifamily housing communities. It's an interesting time in life. I'm afraid that I hit Medicare my next birthday, and I'm not sure I'm at all thrilled about that. But in my practice, I deal with seniors more and more every day, and I hear the same concerns. And those concerns are, Mom and Dad have a limited amount of income. They could buy this townhome or buy this condominium. If they need to, they prefer to rent it. But if we buy in a regular community that's not senior, those people don't want renters. They don't want turnover. And if Mom or Dad gets sick or have to go to a personal care facility, we're stuck on the note. That's one thing we hear. The second thing we hear is that by choice, a lot of seniors, when their needs decrease and their income decrease, are looking to make the most practical decisions living-wise they can make. We find it very attractive to them to live in a community that has elevators, that has people just like them throughout it, that has a sense of security, has a few amenities they can enjoy, and gives them that sense of belonging and being that they'd like to have. That's where they are really looking to go. And I think the true difference that I see is if you permit 50% to be rental, you really give those people the advantage to be able to make this investment. I think more of them will buy it because they understand that if the market is sour when Mom or Dad gets feeble or disabled, or if one of them passes away, they have the opportunity in the short term to rent it and cover the note. And then when the market improves or when someone comes along who wants a senior unit like that, then they can turn it. What we find is that whether they are renters or whether they are owners, we get a lot of nice people with nice lifestyles who unfortunately are just getting older, and they're looking for a community that serves those needs. I hate to face it, but what we look at is, I guess the simple term is downsizing. You get to a point where you don't want a half-acre lot anymore with a house on it, and you don't want to cut the grass, and you don't want to trim the bushes. You'd rather go see the grandchildren play soccer or softball on Saturday afternoon or on Friday afternoon, and the entire lifestyle changes. You don't have the same needs and wants sports-wise or community-wise that you had before, and I think what we'll see throughout Metro North Fulton is a growth in this type of community over the next 5 years. My wife reminded me the other day when we lost my dad that she and I are the old ones now. I've never considered myself old, and I certainly don't want to think I'm an old one, But my generation now is the generation that a lot of times is the oldest in a family structure. I watch people every day who are older than me going through the rigors that they have to deal with when they say, Dad has Parkinson's disease, Mom has developed dementia, Mom had a stroke the other day and she can't do as well. And I see how that is a need that's developed. City of Alpharetta last year strongly considered having a senior housing initiative. Dorothy Benson, who's a great person up here, Dot's been around forever, led that movement. They had 40 or 45 people at their city council meeting. I think in this case, if you so choose, we have the opportunity to step forward with this because it's a unique need. I don't think that you need to go in and say every condominium or every townhouse unit in the city of Milton ought to be 50% rental. I don't think the people who live there intend that. If you grant us this, we will then produce covenants and restrictions for our development, and we will build in this 50% restriction if you permit us that. Then we will have a set of restrictions that we can publish. At this point in time, we don't even have a building. We are just waiting on ready. And those are the two reasons that we have made this request. And I appreciate the fact that staff has been supportive of the reason we've done this. Mr. Jones and his company are certainly capable of going forward with this. And so I ask you two things. If you have any questions for either one of us, please feel free to ask them. And number two, we ask your serious consideration of this request because we feel that it serves the need of the community. It's certainly not a threat to the health, safety, or welfare of anybody in the community. The current conditions are not caused by the applicant. He would have liked to have gone forward 2 or 3 years ago and built this thing, but I'm sure he's very grateful now he didn't because he'd be up to his nose in it. And I don't think that it really violates the spirit of the ordinance. We tried to research back and see why, when this property came from Fulton County, there was a strong limitation on rental. And we just couldn't find any minutes that gave us any apt description of it. I'm sorry it's like that, but I'm sure how aware you are. A lot of things that came out of Fulton County, we have a hard time explaining, or we just don't know. What we do know is that there's a need in the community. There are people very interested in having this type of product, and we would like the opportunity to bring it to them if you see fit. We would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant from the board?
I got a couple.
As do I, so go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate your presentation. I know in our last meeting, a couple of things, and I think you clarified it, but I just want to make sure I understand. We had asked for some clarification around the HOA documents that we presented. You're stating today that you don't have those ready.
No, we need for you to tell us what the percentage will be, and then we can produce the document.
Okay. Secondly, do you have an estimate as to the price range of this particular product?
185, it's on that piece of paper.
I think on those
Oh.
sheets of paper, Mr.
Okay.
Jones has indicated a price range.
Right there.
I apologize. It is there. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you. Yep. Last question I have for you, sir. You had indicated in your presentation that once enough interest has been exhibited, that the first building and the amenities would be built.
That's correct.
What does enough interest mean?
That's not necessarily a definite statement at this point in
I'll
time.
take a
We have
ballpark.
private investors in this case as opposed to an institutional bank. And the private investors would look and see, well, you've got this many sales, you've got this many rentals. I guess what they're looking for is to see that the cash flow would cover the money they invested to build the building.
So
Say
help me.
35, 40%,
35, 40% bought or sold, or both?
both, between the two. I think would be just, and that's an estimate. I'm
No, I understand.
shooting a bit in the dark.
So in each building, and I apologize, sir, I think this was presented last month, and I just don't recall. How many units per building?
A little over 20, is that correct?
So for ballpark, call it 9 units
Yeah,
bought or
I
sold
think that's a
and
good
committed
number.
to. Okay. Those are all my questions.
My wife owned a condo when I married her. And 50% of the condo association had turned into renters because the homeowners association couldn't stop people from renting out there. Even though it was in the homeowners association, they couldn't do it. People went to court, they won. There was not a thing the homeowners association could do. We couldn't sell her unit. When we finally sold it, we went to closing and we gave $45,000 out of our own money. My concern isn't that you want to rent some of these out. My concern is of the people that come in and pay $185,000 for their unit, when they find out that 50% of these are renters, and then they decide they want to sell, and they can't sell because there's so many renters in there, I'm not sure this is what the city of Milton is looking for. This is my concern.
I think that's an excellent concern, and I appreciate you explaining it that way. What we hope to get you to consider is that with a senior community, it's a fairly homogeneous group. The fact that a person is a renter is different than if you have a community of townhomes, say, and condominiums, has no restriction whatsoever, and you have 28-year-old single mothers with a child, and you have 35-year-old families with 2 children, all those things, you have a splay of things, and you would be more likely to attract a renter that is less desirable. We think in a senior community, and we're really kind of out here breaking the ice, that we have a more homogeneous community, and those people who rent lots of times will rent by choice rather than by financial need. And by the very structure of the buildings, it's hard for them to diminish the appearance or the value there. And by the way it's structured, it's also hard to imagine any activities that would run it down that way. When people get older, they don't party as long and they don't party as loud. I'm afraid they tend to come home at night and go to sleep. But if we made a difference, and I understand your concern exactly, it would be the difference in the community of people there. I think your experience has been had 100 times.
So you have a 55-year-old renter that takes in her 32-year-old daughter because she doesn't have a place to live, and she brings her 3 young kids to live with her. I'm not so sure that's good for the people of the city of Milton and the people that have purchased property.
I think we'd have to have some controls on that. I agree with you. That would dissipate the idea of the senior community, and that's not what we're trying to sell. We want seniors to come there and say, I want to live there.
Yes, sir.
So how do you enforce seniors living there?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
How do you enforce seniors living there?
With the covenants and restrictions. You can restrict already by standard. You have to have 80% be 55 or older. You can put in your covenants and restrictions limitations on short-term occupancy, limitations on age of occupants. There are many things that you can do.
So let's say you buy into this senior housing or anyone, and they leave it to their children, who then take over and live in that property. Can you force them to sell?
You can force them not to live there, I think. I think you can say, you don't fit our mode. You can't be here.
I don't think you can do that.
I don't either.
We could debate
So
that the rest of
there's
the
an enforceability point. I mean, you're making a huge statement around senior living being a hardship. In fact, this is a senior housing community, is a hardship in itself. That's what you pointed out, and the marketability of that.
Yeah.
But the enforceability of seniors is equally challenging, and the enforceability when you enter into a rental situation is even more challenging.
I understand.
As a landlord, I can tell you that.
Yeah. I think the other way we try and control it is by the quality and the type of amenities. If we only have a small wading pool and we have a putting green and a croquet green or a shuffleboard court, we don't have any swing sets, we don't have any active amenities. Instead, we have a walking path about a quarter of a mile that goes around the property. That's another thing that keeps people with children from wanting to be there. They have no benefit particularly from being there unless it was just pure financial need, because there's nothing there to attract them.
Yeah, the pure financial need is driving a lot of behavior in this market. And again, as a landlord, you find yourself in a situation where if you can get any cash flow is a good thing.
Oh, I understand.
Because you can't afford to sell because you're underwater, for example, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of considerations here when we crack the door open, which is part of the spirit and intent of this ordinance restricting it to being owner-occupied.
I understand your concern, and I think my feeling would be that we are just in the forefront of a whole new type of community. A senior community is going to become more and more in discussion among all of us because the baby boomers are seniors now. I'm one of them, like you are.
Can I ask you, you have way too much hair to be in the baby boomers.
It turned gray.
But because you want
Yeah.
50%, why don't you just turn this into an apartment complex? Because that's basically what you're asking for. You're basically saying, we want to be able to rent out at least 50% of these. To me, that's an apartment complex. When you're renting out half of the units that you have, why not just rezone the thing and do an apartment complex and build it?
I have two feelings there. Number one, we wouldn't want to do it because we don't think we could sell it or market it. Number two, I don't think the city of Milton would ever approve it. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't.
To me, that's what you're asking for.
I understand your concern.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Staff.
Staff.
Oh, go ahead.
We looked into that. One of the problems with the rezoning is the density. The TR zoning allows a higher density because it's perceived to be owner-occupied than an apartment. Right now, their density is like 19.9, and if they rezoned it to like A, they're looking at 10, 12 units per acre. So that's one of the issues.
And that came before council?
The zoning was approved by the zoning and the use permit were approved by the council.
And
yes.
then they came before this Board of Zoning a
So
couple of years ago,
courtesy
seeking
review.
3 stories.
Which we gave.
I agree.
Because I can only speak for myself, but there isn't anybody that appreciates building in Milton more than I do. So I'm all for building. My concern is for those people that buy a unit that don't realize that 50% of these are going to be rental, and then when they want to go to sell, they can't sell them. That's my concern, is the poor guy and his wife that spent their last $190,000 buying this, and now they can't resell it.
I think to say that, we have to say that the fact that there are renters on the property renders it not sellable. And maybe I'm having a little struggle with that. If you come in there, if you just know from day one when you buy the unit that it's going to be up to 50% rental,
And how are they going to know that?
I think it's going to be disclosed to them.
It has to be.
Well, yeah, it'll be on one of those 143 pieces of paper that you have to sign, and nobody's probably even going to say, this page right here says 50% is rented. They're just going to put it in front of them and say they can rent a couple of these out, and people are just going to sign it and move on, because the only page you look at is the financial statement.
Well, and nor would you necessarily understand the implications
Right,
of
yeah,
that
you see,
50%.
exactly.
That's the big
Yeah, I mean,
big
yeah,
advantage for
yeah,
senior.
yeah. These are my concerns. To me, you're making this an apartment. I'm all for you guys building the thing, and I think it's wonderful. I think the city of Milton needs this. My concern is the 50%. If you said we wanted to rent out 10% of them, I'm right there with you. When you want to rent out 50% of them, we got an apartment complex, in my opinion. And again, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm
understand.
not speaking for the board. Any other questions for the applicant?
One for applicant, then one for staff in a moment. Forgive me, I asked about price of the units, which was on my piece of paper, thank you. Rental price, what's the target range you're looking at? Yeah, that's not gonna cut it.
I would tell you as a rule of thumb in the rental community, it's about $1.02 to $1.05 a square foot.
I understand what the rule.
$800.
I understand what the rule is, but I asked what you were gonna do.
Yeah. So that would just, again, that would be my estimate. If you want to make it
Okay.
work, that's about what it would take.
Thank you.
I understand.
You have a question for staff?
I do. Counselor?
Sir.
Sir.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Counselor, the question that was asked earlier, with the example, senior, 55, 60 years old, has family members, relatives, a non-senior living there with minor children, excuse me. Can you go to dispossessory court? Could you take that to magistrate court and evict them because of that?
I think if you have a contractual provision, the short answer is I haven't looked at the details of that to find you, but I mean, if you have a contractual agreement whereby there are restrictions on going into it on what the living situation may or may not be, I think that there are terms where it would be a violation of the lease, which would subject someone to being evicted after termination of the lease.
Right. Okay. And how long would that take from start to finish to evict somebody out of that unit? How many months?
Part of it would be contractual.
Approximately how many months do you think it would take?
If you were hard and fast and had very limited requirements in the lease, you could probably do it in a couple of months, 2 to 3 would be my guess, assuming they left when they were told to leave, et cetera.
If
That being said, that's best case scenario probably. And
I tried to evict somebody from the rental piece, it probably took me 6 months. It's not as easy as it looks.
it would be between, and some of it is a practical as opposed to a legal, where you are making, you as the landlord are making a evaluation at each stage. Is it worth going to eviction or taking, a little less money this month, and rather than having no money and uncertainty? So usually that process is more a practical concern as opposed to a legal impediment. But it's an individual situation in each case.
Excuse me. At this time, we'd like to open the floor for public comment. Is there any? Sir, at this time, you have an opportunity to make a closing statement or say anything you'd like to.
I'll be very brief. I understand it's a short night for all of us. I've talked with Mr. Jones. I talked about the practicalities of this. And what he tells me is that he's just trying to get the doors open, get the place up, and that if the board felt comfortable by reducing his 50% to 25%, he thinks he could still get it built and get it going. So that's an alternative for you to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions to staff from the board? At this time, I'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion. And I can't make one.
Can we, Mr. Chairman, can we have some
We
discussion?
have to make a motion first, and then we can discuss.
Okay.
We have to follow the rules.
I apologize.
That's all right.
Still learning those rules.
Sure.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that for V12-002, that we allow for a maximum of 25% of the units to be rented. That's that simple.
That's our motion.
Cuts to the chase.
Okay, do we have a second? And we can second for discussion.
You want to wait for discussion?
just-
I was trying to get us to discussion here, so.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Discussion.
Go ahead, what's your point on that, on raising that motion?
Sure. I think it's a couple things. One, I recognize the economic hardships of today, so I want to be empathetic to that to some extent. I do think it does serve Milton in a multitude of ways, both the senior housing that they're discussing. Tenants are always a risky business. I mean, it is what it is. You can't control that. You try to the best of your abilities. But I don't think that we should put an undue hardship upon the applicant. We should give them a little bit of flexibility to allow this to proceed. And I believe the offer of 25% is a reasonable amount versus the 100 that they asked for originally, and that we should consider it.
It was originally 100%.
Yes, sir.
So, understanding the history of this property, first of all, being empathetic to the market conditions is fair, although it's not necessarily one of our considerations.
I understand.
Two, also being empathetic to the product that they're trying to build, although not one of our considerations. If there's truly a market for senior housing, then we shouldn't be having this discussion. So that's why, it's important to understand the market before we build a product. And so I appreciate you're going through some of that due diligence. There's a long history with this project, as we've heard. First, it was sought for double the density and was approved. With the senior living aspect as an anchor point for their argument, allowing for less parking, higher density, all those sort of things. They wanted to go 3 stories. They came before us. We allowed that, given some aesthetic considerations that they offered up. So I think we've done a number of things as a city to accommodate this product. If the reality is there's not a strong market for this product right now, then the product shouldn't be built. I mean, and we're not the determinants of that. I think we as a city have paved the path by doubling the density to allow for a much greater return on this 4.92 acres of land than the normal project would have been subject to. So I'm very concerned, based on our considerations, that this does offend the spirit and intent of the ordinance, because once we crack the door on this rental piece, it creates, we already know senior housing creates a new dynamic. Cracking the door onto rental piece creates a whole nother new dynamic. And I'm speaking from experience as a landlord on that. And the scenario I painted, which I think is a very realistic one, where so there's a lot of considerations there. I don't feel that they are meeting the 5 considerations that we have as a board, or 4 considerations that we have as a board to judge this product on. And the argument that the applicant made of the hardship is that it's a senior housing project, and that the marketability hardship aren't viable arguments. So,
Is there any data out there from other communities that show the success of these kind of rent/own situations? I mean, has this been done anywhere else in Atlanta, for example? Is there any data to show, like over a 3, 4, 5 year period, that people were actually able to sell their properties? I mean, is there data out there to support this proposition, basically?
Sure there is, but I haven't looked.
You sure there is?
Well, I can tell you that
In Atlanta?
I don't think that's a terribly unique situation. I'd have
I know
to
for a
look,
fact.
honestly. I
And
don't
what's that,
know
Chris?
of any.
There is or no?
well, I know, and I can only speak to one specific example, but I know the facts around.
Okay.
There was a senior housing complex built in Hapeville, 48 units, 100% owner-occ. Developer sold it. The new owners finished off the product. 2008 happened, and they couldn't continue to sell the units. They got all the existing homeowners to agree. It had to be 100% to allow for renters to come in, and they had to go in front of the city of Hapeville.
Okay.
And they allowed for tenants to move in that were
Okay.
non-seniors.
Okay.
And the community agreed 100%. They all
Okay.
bought in.
Okay. So
So
now
here
are they
it is,
able to sell?
2012.
So the question would be,
Right.
here, how are they selling?
They are selling to investors. They're not selling to owner
So
occupied.
there's-
All
there's-
not owner occupied then?
right.
Okay.
They're
So-
still owner occupied,
Yeah.
but they're the original owner
So
occupied.
the
Oh.
people
gone
who,
down.
they're selling to investors because investors see a deal because
Correct.
the prices have dropped.
That is I'm sure there are other examples, but that's the only
yeah,
one I have.
That's one piece of data, maybe not enough to make basic decisions.
No, I wouldn't make it. That's it, but I wouldn't make any, that's one example.
And the
I
only
don't know if
thing,
we know enough to judge on this.
the only thing that I would like to add, and I'd like to piggyback on what Mr. Chernick said, and one of our 5 criteria, is C says relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. Public good, and in my opinion, if you buy a unit and then you can't resell it because it's rentals, that's a public problem. And if this does turn into 50% of rental property, I think the surrounding properties, their values goes down as well. So I don't think they've met the criteria, even if they drop it down to 25%, I still think you've got a problem with the public good. I'm all for them building this.
Understood.
They ought to start tomorrow. But I'm 100% against, again, my personal opinion, allowing renters to be part of this, because then it no longer meets our 5 criteria.
And you actually bring up a very good point, that we've made, and it's not something I had considered previously, but we've made a number of exceptions over the years trying to allow for this project to move forward, that were not in the original intent of the zone.
Right.
And we've made exception after exception after exception. 3 exceptions, 4 exceptions?
We've been
2 significant.
Yeah, we've been very fair, and we've basically allowed them to do whatever they wanted to do with the building, to build it, and
to increase the return on the investment, and that's, the economics still aren't working out.
Okay, okay. We have a motion and a second to allow 25% of the units to be rented. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, raise your right hand. It failed unanimously. We need another motion on the floor. Yes, sir.
Regarding case V12-002, to allow units to be both for sale and for lease, I make a motion to deny this variance request.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second for any discussion? We have a motion and a second to deny V12-002. All in favor of the denial, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. It failed unanimously.
Wish you luck with the project.
Good luck, guys.
Good luck.
I did, yes, thank you.
That was good debate.
I did.
All right. Our next case is V12-004, 528 Shadow Hawk, the Highlands, at Echelon Rec area. Angela, will you please present?
Excuse me real quick. On this case, this might be a little long, I'm not sure what you might be here for, but if you need to indicate you want to jump in, just go take a look.
I'm not, I'm just interested.
Okay.
Person watching the process.
Well, thank you for coming.
I've never been to one of these before, so I don't see what.
Well, we appreciate it.
We like having an audience.
This is good.
He's got to come before us before too.
Yeah, I actually voted not for this project. I tried to convince my 15-year-old to join you out in the audience, but that didn't work tonight, so.
Dad,
I know, Dad, do I have
If
to?
you'd given him $50 or
Give him
something.
$50. That's what I'm doing.
Well, I guess I
Where did Angela go?
I don't know.
Oh, it's okay.
Was the name at the time.
You make her mad, Counselor?
The same property? Was it the same property, different property, so?
I think it's the same.
Oh.
When you get a minute, will you please present?
V12-004. The site, Highlands, in the Highlands of Echelon subdivision, is a proposed 65-lot, single-family development located in northwest Fulton overlay. The platted subdivision is zoned AG1. The neighborhood was originally set up to have some form of access to the general amenity area that was to be constructed in the Echelon subdivision. Prevailing market conditions caused the master plan for Echelon and potentially associated surrounding subdivisions to be radically modified. The original master plan currently no longer exists. The new developers, Sharp Residential LLC and Harmony Reserve Investments LLC, proposed to construct an amenity area on a 1.002 acre corner lot, this is lot 36, within the Highlands of Echelon subdivision. The amenity area will include a 1,942 square foot pool house with restrooms and a free-form swimming pool. The developer states that he chose this lot because it was the best one in the subdivision for an amenity. However, the location will require several variances. Section 64-1609 2B states that a neighborhood pool deck, and equipment must be located at least 100 feet from all adjoining property lines. The applicant proposes to place the pool deck, and equipment closer than 100 feet on the side corner, and rear property lines. The pool deck is approximately 70 feet from the side corner property line and 34 feet from the rear property line. The pool deck and equipment are approximately 65 feet from the side property line. The parking lot is located along the side corner. The septic field and reserve field are located along the side property line, and there is extensive grading along the rear of the property. The pool and the pool deck are located to avoid these features. Section 64, 11410 indicates that a swimming pool requires 6 spaces per adult, plus 1 per dwelling unit beyond 60 served. Staff calculated the required number of spaces to be 22. Sharp Residential proposes 7 spaces. Section 64, 237 requires that a landscape strip be provided along all lot lines. Sharp proposes to reduce the 40-foot front landscape strip to 10 feet. They also propose to reduce the 20-foot front corner landscape strip to 15 feet. Due to these proposed alterations, variances are required. On April 10th, 2012, the DRB offered the following comments. The board member agrees that this is the best lot in the subdivision for amenity, but notes that the developer does have the option of expanding into more than one lot. A member states parking will be your big issue. There will be parking on the street. Another comment was, it's great that you're doing an amenity. One member commented it's not that he was not in favor of eliminating the 40-foot landscape strip. And the board suggests that the applicant prepare a final landscape plan to present to the BZA. The board requests a review of the landscape plan when the LDP is applied for. The staff held a focus meeting on April 10th, 2012, and the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, and DOT stormwater all had no issues. The arborist had the following comments. In the event that any variances are granted, the same required quantity and density of trees will be required to be installed on the site as required per the tree ordinance. All required trees should be planted on this lot. Evergreen trees along heritage paths should be changed to deciduous trees to better match existing foliage. Standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant responds as follows. We have a definite need to construct a swimming pool and pool house for the use of the residents, as it is expected in this size neighborhood with the style, size, and value of the homes that we are building and selling. Any lot in this subdivision would require variances. Lot 36 is the best possible use for this. The variances that are being requested relate mainly to setback issues in landscape strips. The front corner landscape strip area contains an existing storm drainage easement, and the plantings will be positioned so that they would not fall on top of the pipe. As for the reduction in parking spaces, the size of the site will not support the number of spaces that have been calculated. Sharp Residential is committed to building a quality neighborhood that will be consistent with the long-term development desires of the City of Milton. There are no homes currently built in the neighborhood, so there is no issue with offending current residents. Also, we believe that relief based on requested adjustments to the ordinance, if granted, will not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance, nor would it cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. Finally, public safety, health, and welfare will still be secured. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. The recreation area shall have a minimum of 10 parking spaces. A bike rack shall be installed on the amenity site. The reduced landscape strips shall be planted according to the standards of the required landscape strips. All required trees shall be planted on the subject lot, which is lot 36, and shall replace the proposed evergreen screen with deciduous trees that blend in with the existing vegetation. This concludes the staff presentation.
Are there any questions to the staff from the board? Yes, sir.
I do have one question, and it's pertaining to page 3 of the background, section 64-1410. I'm not clear on the calculation of the parking spaces and how this is written here.
So I calculated it, let's see, there's six, actually at the time I thought there were 69 lots. So I calculated 2 adults per lot, which, so that's 138, that's 138, and then I divided that by 6, and that gave me 22.
Okay. All right.
And we noted this at DRB, also the ordinance, the table itself is written kind of in a weird way.
That was my question. Are these personnel given their own insight? They're not doing it as a board anymore?
I'm sorry?
On this DLRB, it looks like each
Well,
person.
I just wrote comments as they came.
Okay.
So, because they don't, they don't vote.
No, but usually it's,
So, I mean, the individual comments, well, I mean, sometimes they have differences of opinions.
okay.
I write them all.
All right,
I give you everything.
That answers my question. Thank you very much. Any other questions for staff? This time, we'd like to invite the applicant up to present. If you'd state your name and address, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time. My name is Farrell Middleton with Sharp Residential, 4080 McGinnis Ferry Road, Building 700, Alpharetta 30005. Representing Sharp Residential, and Harmony Reserve Investments LLC is just a sister company that's the holding company for now. Sharp Residential will be selling and marketing these homes, purchasing the lots from that other entity. So that's just a little clarification there. Basically what I've done here, this is a site map of the entire neighborhood, and Springville Road right here. This actually is Fulton County. This is the Fulton Cherokee County dividing line right here. This is the Echelon Golf Course over here, and as stated in the hardship letter, the entire Echelon development, certainly was going to be bigger than what it's turned out to be, and obviously for all the conditions that we all know are going on in the real estate market. This property was platted about 4 years ago. Obviously, it's been sitting there with no activity whatsoever. We have purchased all the lots, and since the initial echelon scheme, for lack of a better term, is pretty much just dissipated. With these lots, we certainly feel a need to have an on-site amenity. We would have liked to turn into tennis courts, however, one lot would not support swimming pool, pool house, tennis courts, and parking lot. We did certainly look around the neighborhood. That would not have been available on any lot. Obviously, for financial purposes, we want to use one lot for this purpose, and we do feel that, again, with the granting of variances, that this will fit nicely onto this particular lot. From a internal geographic standpoint, inside the neighborhood, again, here's Freemanville Road. Basically, got a couple side streets, and we've got the cul-de-sacs. This is deep into the neighborhood, so it will be, basically accessible only by the residents of the neighborhood. Nobody, the traffic on the street is going to notice it or anything like that. So again, there's no appearance issues except inside the neighborhood. The corner lot itself helps quite a bit due to the orientation of what we want to do with the parking lot, pool house, and swimming pool. If we were to use, let's say, just take for example lot number 31, then we would have to cram all of that, basically parking lot, pool house, swimming pool. And again, those lots just don't set up. This is almost a perfectly square lot, as you can tell, and everything lays out nicely from a two-dimensional standpoint. Three-dimensionally as well, and this is actually on one of the sheets that you've got. This one right here that doesn't show the landscape plan. Great. The topographic lines here represent the existing topography.
I'm sorry, bear with us a second, sir. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Thank you.
The existing topo lines are on here. This lot actually, I guess for lack of a better term, there's a knoll there in the middle of the lot. So from an elevation standpoint with the pool house, relatively close to the curb. Again, from a disturbed area standpoint, we're trying to get this in. We obviously want to leave as many natural trees as possible. We want to clear as few as certainly we need to. But topographically, this site sets up extraordinarily well for what we want to try and do with this. Because again, you can tell the grade situation within the pool and pool house, the grade variation is very low for the distance of the parking lot. So from that standpoint, this is just the best lot in the neighborhood in which to put this. As I mentioned in my hardship letter, any of the lots in here would require probably the same number approximately of variances that we would have that we're looking for on that consideration, our thought is that all the lots share the same characteristic accordingly. So, yeah, this is the overall plan that we've got. The second page, which you have, that you've already been submitted, is a layout showing the landscape strips here. And on Shadow Hawk, which is this side of the street here, considering that as the front property line, again, we improved on equal to very, very helpful. On front versus side here. So right here along Shadow Hawk is a request to decrease the strip from 40 feet to 10 feet. And this is pretty much just a dimensional issue that we are trying to work around. What we would do with that per this drawing is trees and shrubs in that 10-foot easement area, and then outside that 10-foot strip on the property, we would plant trees and shrubs that would equal the amount that would go into a 40-foot landscape strip. They just wouldn't be in, you know, the 40-foot is, again, it's just which we call representing here, that we want to put in the required number of trees and bushes that would go into a 40-foot landscape strip on site. So that's the one on Shadow Hawk. The other one here on the main road, on here is Pass. We're requesting to decrease that from a 20-foot wide landscape strip to a 15-foot wide landscape strip. So certainly much less. And again, we would still put in the same number of trees and shrubs that would be required for the 20-foot width on that. If we continue looking around the balance of the other two, the rear line and the side line, what we have shaded on this is a tree save area as well. Starting here, very close to Heritage Path Main Road, and wrapping around the back corner, that's going to be an undisturbed area. And again, that includes part of the reserve septic field that obviously we would not need to get into. And of course, you know, very rarely do you have to get into those. But we would certainly leave everything possible untouched. So those are the four main landscape strip buffer areas. With regard to the 100-foot dimensional issue with the adjoining property lines, that of course, again, would be on any lot that we would have. And that, I think, is on three sides. We're actually, if I understand correctly, not in violation of the front line. The Shadow Hawk pool is only 100 feet away from the property line here. So, minor point there, but we do have those dimensional issues with regard to that. So those are the 300-foot. On the parking area, I've talked with Angela about this many times. We are interpreting the parking ordinance differently. We believe that it reads that there are 6 spaces needed per adult swimming pool, and then with 1 additional space for 15 additional housing units. So the first 6.
Say that one more time, if you would, I'm sorry.
Actually, I've got a copy of the chart here that I made for you guys to keep in that one. 6 parking spots per adult swimming pool. Then 1 additional parking spot for each 15 more units beyond 60. So we have 64 units. 6 spots for the first 60, then 1 spot for every 15 units above 60. So we have 4 beyond 60, so that means 1 more parking spot for a total of 7. Is the way we're interpreting it. Okay. And actually, I've got a copy of that.
Makes sense.
Most people are going to walk anyway. Not a big neighborhood.
Not in Milton. No one wants.
Nobody wants to. Yes, they do.
They drive their kid to this town.
I have 45.
We can be adults and
Okay,
be kind to one another.
any questions to the applicant from the board? Mr. Cherney, if your name hand was up first.
I have a question. What's the lot, I guess, if we're doing the east-west orientation, to the west, to the left of that? What's that lot number?
This one?
Yes.
That's lot 35.
So based on the topo on your that you provided, it looks like where the swimming pool is situated, the property actually drops off to lot 35,
That is correct, yes.
but yet there doesn't appear to be much screening. So this pool would be elevated to that lot without really any screening.
Okay, except for the landscape strip that would be in there.
10 foot,
Yeah, 10-foot landscape strip.
which is from you to me,
Pardon?
which is about the distance from you to me.
Correct. Actually, it's a little shorter than that, but yes, you're correct. And again, I don't have my site plan here. I don't know exactly where the house on lot 35 is going to go. But with these large lots, we are certainly going to try to keep everything we can. Now, what we could do as well is, as stated with the decrease of these landscape strips from the 20 to 15 to 40 to 10, we could obviously put any of those required plantings anywhere on the property that would be agreeable to Mark Law, the city architect. And I've met with him a couple of times on this one. That's a very good conversation about how we would be able to manage the plantings on site to help with that particular type of issue.
Okay, when you talk about plantings, my fellow board member happens to be absent, who's the authority on this. The plantings that are at your discretion, what type of plantings are you looking at?
Actually, I don't know that they're going to be at our discretion. We normally take direction from Mark Law, the arborist, for that. And basically what we have on here.
In other words, are they shrubs, are they trees, or are they?
There's a combination of trees and shrubs. And basically, on this, on the plan that shows the trees, there are a couple of notes in here. For example, if we take a look at the one that's referring to Shadow Hawkins, which is coming right off here, in the 10-foot strip, it's calling for 8 hardwood trees, 20 foot on center, and 32 shrubs. And then we have a planting schedule in the lower right corner with regard to the types of trees and shrubs that would be required for the planting plan.
Okay.
So it'd be a variety.
So my concern, as I'm just highlighting for you to address, would be the fact that the swimming pool is going to be elevated, it drops off, which would, I think by anyone's judgment, would be into someone's backyard.
That's pretty good, yes.
Into someone's backyard with little screening. Second question I have for you is, what's the width of the streets in this proposed subdivision?
Oh, probably 30 feet.
30-foot width?
I don't know right off the top of my head. You say the width of Aaron's Pass, for example?
The drawings show 44-foot right-of-ways. What their actual, I don't know what the actual road width will be. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right away. That's what I'm looking for, the width of the streets,
Okay.
given the consideration for parking on the streets. And if there's 2 typical widths, and if it's the smaller of the 2, that's going to be a problem.
Okay, I do not know that off the top of my head.
All right. And will there be sidewalks in the neighborhood?
There is a sidewalk on one side of the street.
Which side as relates to this?
It's like it's on the side of the street with the pool.
I believe
Yeah,
the sidewalk is on.
Doesn't actually say.
It's on the,
North side of the street.
yeah.
On the opposite side of
On
the
the
pool?
opposite side of the pool is.
Because that,
Oh, really?
you see where I'm going with that, right? People who walk to the pool and you can have the opposite side of it. All right.
No, it's actually on the
It's
side
on-
of the
yeah.
street with the.
It's on the pool side.
It's on the pool side.
Where do you see
Yeah.
that?
Right here.
Proposed concrete
Have-
sidewalk.
Sir, have any of the 64 homes, have any of them under construction yet?
Not under construction yet, but we're hoping to apply for our first permits this week. We've had some development issues with the water department.
So the pool is going to be the first thing that you build?
No, actually, we've been blessed with many pre-sales in there. I think we have.
I guess my question is, again, what's the number of the lot next to the swimming pool that Mr. Chernick was talking about?
Well, we have lot 35 and 37.
Okay,
They're directly
so
adjoining.
are 35 and 37 going to be built before the pool?
No, that's not our intention. We want to go in and build this as quickly as we can, obviously, for market.
So those people would be able to see,
They will know.
okay,
Yes.
thank
they
you.
will know.
Hey, are there trees on the east side of the adjoining lot? See, west, that lot right there, yes, sir, yeah. Are there trees on the east side of that lot, do you know?
This is a very heavily wooded neighborhood.
So it is
in general.
it's heavily wooded right in there?
Heavily wooded right now. Again, I can't give you a density
Pictures?
calculation or anything like that.
I don't have
but
pictures.
It's very heavily wooded. But this is
No pictures.
Yeah, there are a lot of trees.
What was there?
Yeah.
See, you know,
Can't carry
on,
on.
on the dock,
Scrubs or not.
on the dock, that was, did you get, did she give that to you? Or?
It's in your packet.
It wasn't in the emailed version.
Look
I
at
do want to see the pictures. They weren't part of your email.
Any other questions to the applicant?
I do, if I may, sir. Do you, only because I know this particular community has started and stopped a couple times with this type of development before. Do you have financing right now to put this into place so that if you get approval from the board tonight and whatever, thank you, whatever type of conditions might apply, are you able to financially make this happen within a short period of time? Or do you have to wait for X amount of sales to occur before you can do this? You're ready for this to occur, okay. And 64 units, is that how many?
64 total, yes.
64 total, okay. All right.
Any projection on the price?
We're right about 400,000 right now. But again, with the contracts, I think we have 8 pre-sales to date. We're
What
pleasant
size
surprised.
houses?
Average about 3,200 square feet. And again, elevationally, we're going with three-car side entry garages. Mixed materials, 3 sides brick. But the front elevations will have the mixed materials that's very popular these days. Stone, brick, shake, board and batten, cedar shake, that kind of stuff. Traditional architecture. We're currently building in Milton Place at Hickory Crest right now on Hopewell Road. And basically, the product is going to be the same as what we're doing in there.
Is there
Sorry.
any,
No.
are you done?
No, you're not
I
done.
have
Oh,
one
go
more.
ahead and ask.
I
Go
have
ahead.
one more question.
Go ahead.
And this will seem out of left field, but let me ask the question. Have you already contracted with a landscape architect to build this and/or an installation company?
We have contracted with a landscape architect to help design the entrance.
Right.
Which of course is non-existent at this point in time. And we would have to have, my understanding is city Milton requirements would require us to have a registered landscape architect finalize the landscape
Or,
plan.
right, and a landscape contractor is probably the word I should have used. And I'm asking for a very specific reason.
Okay. We have a landscape contractor that does all of our work for us.
May I ask who that is?
It's a company called Firm Foundations.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
You're going to put 7 parking places on this?
That's the way we're interpreting the city ordinance.
If I can address that, actually, I think the way the code is written in the book, it is a little confusing, and I believe, as I read it in the interpretation that we provided, it says 6 per adult swimming pool, and I think the staff calculation was a calculation of the total number of adults that may be in the community, and I think we're going to say that the interpretation is 6 per adult swimming pool, which would mean 6 plus 1 beyond the 60 units, dwelling units. So I believe 7 is actually the appropriate calculation.
That answers my question.
And I don't think they would need a variance to that based on the plan they've shown.
Thank you. Any additional questions to the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This time, we'd like to open up the floor for public comment. Are you sure? Okay. Sir, at this time, you have the opportunity to say, make another statement, whatever you.
Okay, thank you. Basically, obviously, we're asking for many variances on this lot. We're very well aware of that. Again, we've, Angela's been extraordinarily helpful to us, as has Mr. Long, St. Barbara's. Basically, we've come in, we've made a very serious financial investment in this property. Again, with the average price being around that $400,000 range, and one-site amenity for 64 lots. 64 lots from a homeowner association standpoint, graciously to support this as time goes by. We wouldn't put this in if it was 20 or 25 lots, where there are obviously some economic skills that we have to deal with on that. But basically, very little development out there. We're very excited about the pre-sale contracts that we've had so far. Pleasantly surprised with that. And again, basically, we think that this will fit in very nicely within the neighborhood, and it will be an absolute draw to the general public for wanting to occupy the neighborhood and come in. We think it's just a very good idea for a project selling to young families, you know, all of that. That seems to be our profile these days. And we obviously are respectfully requesting that you look at this favorably. And,
Thank you.
Well, I personally want to thank you for picking the city of Milton. I appreciate that.
We're very happy in the city of Milton at this point in time. Y'all have a great city. My sister lives in the city of Milton. So, and actually, our activity in Milton Place and Victory Crest is going very well as well. So
Thank you.
we've hit a very good price point, very good range, and we think, you know, we're enhancing the city of Milton from residential.
Thank you.
Just one quick question for you. How many lots are in Vickery Crest?
Victory Crest has a total of 63 will be the total in Victory Crest, and Milton Place has 27 directly across the street, and we control that.
Okay, and just one other question, because you guys came before us on Vickery Crest around this pool amenity.
Okay.
How many parking spots are there?
I think we're ending up with 9 parking spots, I believe, and
Okay.
it's the same count. We have a total of 90 lots between the two neighborhoods, and that was part of the whole approval of that amenity area.
Yeah.
So I think we have the same 6 for adult swimming pool, and then we had 90 lots, that would be 2 additional ones. I think the site allowed us to add 1 or 2 extra spots. So we tried to get as much as we could.
I wanted to, I thought when the council brought that up, I remembered that example, so thank you.
Okay.
Any questions to staff? This time I'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion. And I can't make one.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve V12-004 with the recommended conditions. Oh, I have to read them. With the
Yes, sir.
requested variances listed on page 1 to allow pool deck, and equipment to be closer than 100 feet on the side corner property line. To allow pool deck, and equipment to be closer than 100 feet from the side property line. To allow pool deck, and equipment to be closer than 100 feet from the rear property line. To allow reduction in parking from 22 to 7 spaces.
And I'm sorry, that doesn't require a variance, that interpretation is as per code.
Okay,
Well, just-
throw that one.
Uh-huh.
To allow a reduction of the rear setback from 50 to 25 feet. To allow a reduction of the 40-foot front landscape strip to 10 feet. And to allow a reduction of the 20-foot front corner landscape strip to 15 feet. With the recommended conditions on page 7. Yeah, a bike rack shall be installed on the amenity site. The reduced landscape strips shall be planted according to the standards of the required landscape strips. All required trees shall be planted on subject lot 36, and replace proposed evergreen screen with deciduous trees that blend in with existing vegetation.
Can you also reference the drawing, the plat?
Referencing, how do I reference this? Lot 30, zoning variance plat for Lot 36, Unit 2, the Highlands of Echelon, as presented by Harmony Reserve Investments.
Are these dated?
Is there a date on that?
It's right here.
Dated 3/23/2012.
Question, are you referring only to the variance plat? There's a sheet 1 and sheet 2, there's a landscape plan as well. Are you requiring compliance
What's
with
the date on
one
that
or
That's
both?
one.
They're both dated 3/23/12. And there's a sheet 1 and sheet 2.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion.
So it did look from the drawing, just to clarify for everyone's benefit, that the street is 24 foot wide. If you look, it says 24 curb to curb on there. The reason I bring that up is some streets are narrower than that, which makes, if there's someone who is parked on that street, passage is going to be very difficult. This would be, this is just a consideration.
Any other discussion?
I'm a little concerned, if I can, I don't know where my map went to, I'm sorry. On the east side of the street, the buffer, which is from 40 to 10, is it it's a 10-foot buffer on both sides, east and west? Is that correct? On the east side of the street, which is next to Shadow Hawk, it's a street. I'm less concerned about that. Next to, I forget the lot.
35.
35, that I am worried about. That is right up to that puppy.
Well, the only, and that's why the question that I asked was, is that property sold and is it gonna go quickly? And the answer is no. And if they don't screen it correctly, they'll never sell that lot. So then the person that buys it can decide, does that bother me or does it not? So that's why I didn't amend it and put anything into that, because I kind of thought, once the pool goes in, then if you.
Take care of itself.
Yeah, it'll take care of itself. Because if the lot's, yes, sir.
If the pool goes in first.
Well,
He's saying it will.
he's saying it will.
I know there, to address this concern, simply making the condition that lot 35 needs a disclosure on this site plan. So it's someone,
If somebody wanted to make a friendly amendment to that,
Sure.
I would be all for that. You could do 35, what was the other one,
Well, there are
39?
a couple lots. I'd suggest making it to that point.
35 and
That's fine.
37
Yeah.
are the adjoining, correct?
I'd be okay with that.
If there's a disclosure
Yep.
of
Yeah, I
the
think
site
I'm
plan
fine
to
with
those
that.
prospective
Sure.
buyers.
Sure.
Can he add that to his motion without doing a friendly amendment? Can we? I hate these friendly amendment things.
It's just an amendment.
It's just-
Okay, good, call it what you want.
I think if he proposes his amendment with this, the second agrees to it, satisfied
Okay.
with that, we can vote on it as a whole.
All right. So I add a proposal, an amendment that lots.
Essentially, just amending your own motion, the second.
I'll amend the motion to add conditions that buyers of lot 35 and 37 be given full disclosure on location of the amenity area,
Site plans.
according to the site plans, sheets 1 and 2.
Second.
Any discussion? We have a motion to approve petition number V12-004 to allow a pool deck and equipment to be closer than 100 feet on the side corner property line, to allow a pool deck and equipment to be closer than 100 feet from the side property line, to allow a pool deck and equipment to be closer than 100 feet from the rear property line, to allow a reduction of the rear setback from 50 feet to 25 feet, to allow a reduction of the 40-foot front landscape strip to 10 feet, and to allow a reduction of the 20-foot front corner landscape strip to 15 feet with the following conditions. Number 1, a bike rack shall be installed on the amenity site. Number 2, the reduced landscape strip shall be planted according to the standards of the required landscape strips. Number 3, all required trees shall be planted on subject lot 36. 4, to replace the proposed evergreen screen with deciduous trees that blend in with existing vegetation. And 5, lots 35 and 37 shall receive full disclosure of the amenity area according to the site plan, page 1 and 2, dated 3/23/2012. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. Passed unanimously. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Very appreciative.
Would you like your parking math back?
Who is the original owner or developer?
Let's see, Steve Casey.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Whatever person, looking, sorry, the regret lot 53 is going to be,
That's good, that's good.
People like to be able to just walk to the pool.
Yeah, well, people do like it. It is good. It is.
I think that 6 is
Any new business?
insufficient amount.
Anybody want to talk
Yes,
about?
I would, I'm sorry.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to discuss amending some of our bylaws and asking council to review those along with staff to see if any modifications should be made to them.
So this is a general, open, whatever needs to be addressed, not specifically the
Not
referral
specific,
point?
right. I think that would behoove us let's do it once or twice, get it right.
Yeah, well, and I'm not sure we want to be overly specific on these either, because we want to give people plenty of opportunity to defer if they need to.
Absolutely.
Right, so,
I would never suggest
Right.
after 3 times you're out. I
Right.
mean, that's,
yeah. So I think you worded that very well to allow council and staff to.
And my concept in taking that direction would be to identify issues at the first presentation to the board, at which time the board could provide me with the guidance on the specifics of what they would like to see. It says that the next time it comes back, it can be in a position that could be approved or amended easily by the board and considered at that point with the specifics of how it gets changed.
I did kind of have a question. I know you want us to look at the deferral process. Just off at the top of your heads, your thoughts.
How many times?
I know I thought maybe
Yeah.
well, beyond giving them the right to, well, did we ever figure out what happens if they deny a deferral? Or they just have to-
I think what we may need to do is between the two is present some options, what may have been done in other situations, and I think the concept is to give you options
right. We don't want
that
to be
you can
handcuffed.
choose from,
Right.
rather than being tied down to you must continue it till the next meeting, as it stands right now, and we can present some of those.
Do we need to make a motion, a second, and vote on this?
I don't think so. We'll bring it back to you. We'll put it on the next meeting agenda.
Okay. Any other new business? Any old business? We need a motion to adjourn, and I can't do it.
You keep saying this.
Because Walter usually does it.
When he asked for the motion earlier, we all just looked at him like, I'm not making a motion.
We could just leave.
Another 30 minutes.
We could.
What would happen? What would happen if we didn't make a motion to adjourn?
All right, let me tell you.
Angela will be here all
The minute
night.
you walk out, I'm right behind you. I make a motion to adjourn.
There'll be
Do
a
it.
lack of quorum.
Do we have a second?
Yes, over here.
Discussion. All in favor of adjourning, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. It passed unanimously.